All right, Gaza War Day 242 or 242. If you don't know the reference, that's okay because it's pretty much defunct anyway. No end in sight. Interestingly, Biden's offer of a ceasefire, which he made, the speech that he made a couple days ago, which we talked about in our therapy session on Sunday, it hasn't left the news. It's been days, and the American officials are still talking about it. Like the Israelis, they're continuing to pretend the Israelis haven't rejected it, which they have. They're continuing to talk to Israelis. They're calling on the Israeli hostage families to accept the deal. The Biden spokesman, the Count Chocula guy, he said that Hamas is the only obstacle to the deal. So they're trying to keep this going. They're trying to keep this item going, and it's not entirely clear to me why. The best I can make of it is this is an extremely expensive and credibility destroying operation to try to blame Hamas for something, even though they've called Hamas sexual predators, they've called Hamas beheaders of babies, both of things that Israelis are proven to be and that Hamas are not, but they've called them everything. They've demonized them comprehensively. They've said they have to be destroyed. They've celebrated the deaths of thousands of them. They've said that the rest of them have to be exterminated. They've done all this incredible demonization of Hamas across Western society. And now they're now they're doing this to blame them for not taking a deal. And it's totally, of all the things they're accusing Hamas of doing, this seems to be among the least. I mean, sure, they've always blamed them for the genocide of Palestinians, but who are they convincing beyond people they already have convinced? It's uh hard to say. The G7 in one unified way has said that Hamas has to take this deal. There's an interesting statement actually they made. It's on the State Department website or whatever that all the leaders of the G7 countries have said Hamas has to take the deal. They said something like this deal, comma. It's an interesting statement. It says this deal, comma, which Israel has expressed willingness to take or something. Let me pull it up here before I go on. Okay. Let's take a look, focus on this last paragraph here. We call on Hamas to accept this deal, comma, that Israel is ready to move forward with, comma, and we urge countries with influence over Hamas to help ensure that it does so. Israel has already rejected this deal. Israel has already rejected this deal. The G7 are all extensive suppliers, funders, spiritual best friends with Israel. They know that they know about this, but they're all saying this deal, comma, that Israel is ready to move forward with, comma, and we urge countries with influence over Hamas. I mean, it's so interesting that they want countries with influence over Hamas to do stuff that they're not willing to do when they have influence over Israel. But of course, what they do have the ability to do is lie through their teeth, which Biden also has. And they're doing that to the best of to the most brazen extent imaginable. The other note that I wanted to say, Biden mentioned in his uh, lecture the other day that the deal that he was putting on the table included 600 trucks a day humanitarian aid. It's been a trickle of aid. People are starving. You've probably seen all the starvation happening, all the starvation of children that they're doing, which Israelis, of course, are celebrating. Israeli society loves to see starving children. So here's another thing that it says here. The deal outlined by President Biden that would lead to an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all hostages, a significant and sustained increase in humanitarian assistance for distribution throughout Gaza. This is an admission that food is being used as a weapon. This is they're saying take the deal and we'll get you more humanitarian assistance for distribution throughout Gaza. So their humanitarian assistance is contingent on Hamas taking this deal, which means they are holding the population hostage and using starvation to try to compel them to make a deal. That's the G7. The whole G7 has signed on to that. The combined West, as the pro-Russia people like to call them. So, look, one question that arises is all of this did they do all of this just to blame Hamas? Or is it some kind of ineffective pressure where the idea is that Biden wants to pressure Israel, but America wants to make sure that any pressure on Israel is exerted in a way as to preserve Israel's ongoing genocide and its ability to conduct genocide indefinitely into the future. If you're trying to pressure someone that you love and you're trying to do it in a way that would never hurt them, and you see them committing a crime, a murder in progress, and you want to make sure they can complete that murder, you're not going to exert any pressure that might challenge their ability to commit the murder, the mass murder. So America is not going to threaten them with anything like cutting weapon supplies or even, maybe letting a Security Council resolution pass or letting the ICC warrants be fulfilled. Instead, the American Congress has passed a resolution to sanction the International Criminal Court, which is also not good for them long term. But nobody is thinking long term on the pro-Israel side anymore, which is a point I'm going to return to. So those are the only two options. This is either just one long, the only two options I can think of anyway. But this is either just one long-winded attempt at blaming Hamas for yet one more thing, or it's a incredibly gentle attempt to exert pressure based on a hypothesis that there are more Israelis who care about their own hostages than actually exists, and that more Israelis who want to stop the war than actually exist. There are not. That constituency is much smaller than I think the Biden people think, if that's what's going on. You probably have figured out by now, or I've said it explicitly, that I'm not a big believer in assigning incompetence to the enemy. I believe that if your enemy or your opposition looks incompetent, you should study very carefully what they're doing and try to figure out how it could be competent and how you could be deceiving yourself and believing what you want to believe about them. These moves, this whole rollout of this ceasefire proposal only to be spat on by Netanyahu publicly, they don't make it easy. They don't make it easy. The easiest explanation is that they are flailing and have no idea what they're doing, which again makes them very dangerous and makes this moment very dangerous, which I'm going to return to. Now, I want to tell you a bit about how Hamas has responded to this ceasefire pantomime. One of the leaders, Osama Hamdan, made a press conference today, and a lot of what he said focused on the Palestinian prisoners. And this is a really important point because you'll see Biden's Biden's ceasefire proposal are going around in the media as a ceasefire for hostages deal. So Israel gets its hostages back, Palestinians get a short ceasefire before Israel resumes the war. Great, shiny deal. That's what Israel wants. That's not what Hamas wants. That's not what the Palestinians have ever wanted. They want to trade the Israeli hostages slash prisoners of war. Many of them are military prisoners for the Palestinian prisoners, the thousands, about 10,000 Palestinian prisoners who have been absolutely tortured at a more intense rate and level of torture since October 7th, and hundreds, maybe thousands of whom have been detained since October 7th. And this is such a huge contrast, the things that Palestinians are doing and suffering on a mass scale for their own prisoners, for the sake of getting their prisoners back, for the sake of ultimately making it a situation where Israel cannot take Palestinian prisoners, do not have that power to take Palestinian prisoners. That is the end goal of a free Palestine, of liberation, that if there are criminals that are Palestinian, they will be imprisoned by their own Palestinian state, not by a colonizing apartheid state that hates them racially and believes them to be racially inferior. That such a state should not have any, that has no business imprisoning and incarcerating the people they're colonizing. So it was interesting that this Hamas leader made such an emphasis on the prisoners in the press conference today. The other thing that, I mean, Hamas spokespeople have been talking to the media about this supposed Biden ceasefire. One of them said that they haven't even received a proposal. All they've received from the Israelis is an objection to the mediator proposal that has been made, the mediators being Qatar and Egypt. Another statement from Hamas that I've seen today, I'm going to quote from it. It says as follows: Netanyahu's statements somewhat respond to Biden's speech, indicating that he does not want to move toward any practical agreement. The primary guarantee for implementing any agreement is our strength on the ground as a people and resistance. That's shows a real understanding of the situation by Hamas. We will not allow the occupation to have any role in arranging our internal affairs, whether the situation inside Gaza or managing the crossings in general, especially the Rafah crossing. The occupation must withdraw from the Rafah crossing, which is a Palestinian consensus, and the previous administration of the crossing should return. Arranging the Palestinian situation is an internal matter we Palestinians will manage without agreeing to any regional or international pressure. So Hamas is basically saying, you're not going to use negotiations to change the status quo out of our favor, to partially occupy more of Gaza than you've had before, to regime change the authorities in Gaza. All of those things are up to the Palestinians alone. And they're not gonna move from, they're announcing that they're not gonna move from that position. Might as well talk a bit more about Gaza. There are a field videos that I saw from Gaza today, two of them. They are from Jabalia. There's a major explosive ambush. There's a field report of fighting, targeting tanks and other armored vehicles. I can't tell whether these are field reports that I've already read and talked to you about in previous sit reps, because we know that Israel has largely withdrawn from Jabalia. So these videos of the fighting in Jabalia probably are from before, and they're just rolling them out now. That's what I think is going on. There is actually fighting on the ground in southern Gaza City. I've seen field reports of bulldozers, Merkavas hit in southern Gaza City, and there's also been immense aerial bombing of the central Gaza, the camps, Burej camp, Nusayrat camp, and southern Gaza City. So the Israelis are fighting now in the north, I mean, the south of the north, I guess you could say, the south of Gaza City, as well as the middle of Gaza. So there's also massive fighting in Rafah, continuing fighting in Rafah in the very south. So active war in the north and the south and the center all over Gaza. There's continuous fighting after the withdrawal from Jabalia and Zaytun. Remember, 3 weeks ago, Israel lined everything up and said they were invading Rafah. They attacked Rafah with one division and sent two divisions north to Zaytun and Jabalia, and they've withdrawn from both Zaytun and Jabalia. They are, however, invading the West Bank. They're all over the West Bank. Tubas, Jenin invaded again. Nablus, there was major fighting in Nablus and the Balata refugee camp associated with Nablus. The Israelis assassinated a young resistance leader named Adam Faraj and another resistance fighter named Muataz al-Nabulsi during a wedding, staying on brand for the Israelis, attacking people at a wedding. There was also more treachery by the Palestinian Authority in Tubas, helping the Israelis and the Al-Quds, Surah Al-Quds, they made another statement talking about how they really, really don't want to be fighting against their own people. So that's the West Bank. Now, I've referred continuously to the idea that Israel is making errors. When I quoted the latest speech from Nasrallah, he said their detachment from reality is causing them to make bigger and bigger errors. I think he was referring to what I'm about to talk to you about, which is I'm seeing a lot of indicators of a major escalation with Lebanon. There are statements that kind of fanatical Israeli politicians have been making forever about how they need to go and destroy Beirut, they need to destroy Lebanon, they need to push all the residents of Lebanon's borderlands all the way north. They need to occupy Lebanon, they need to destroy Beirut. That is kind of continuous for decades. I mean, since Israel's existed, they've talked about destroying all their neighbors. They love to talk about destroying their neighbors. And Lebanon, because Hezbollah has opened that front against them since October 8th, they have been talking about escalation. You remember Nasrallah has mocked them. He said, with what forces are you going to invade Lebanon when your forces have been so battered fighting in Gaza? And the thing is, once again, the strategic logic in terms of conservation of their military capacities would mitigate against attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. They know that Hezbollah has better strategic depth. They're not surrounded the way that Gaza is. They have supply lines. They have more missiles. They have better missiles. They have the ability to hit any target in Israel. And they have been reciprocating everything that Israel has done. And that's why these have been the days of forest fires that have been set by Israel in the first case in Lebanon, and then right back at them in northern Israel. So I'm just showing a map here of this is the settlement, the Israeli settlement of Kiryat Shimona. You may know these names: Kiryat Shimona, Metula, Chiam. These are all areas, Shlomi, these are all areas along the Israel-Lebanon border that Israel has used to create a posture, an intimidating posture by having surveillance equipment and military bases and armored vehicles and cannon and everything all along this border between Lebanon and Israel. And these are the things that have been continuously hit by missiles and rockets and artillery from Hezbollah for the past 8 months now. Ninth month starting in a few days. And Kiryat Shimona, you can see green. Green are relatively forested areas. It's not all people get the idea that the Middle East is a desert. It's not all desert. The Mediterranean climate, there's lots of agriculture, and or up here in the higher elevation, there's plenty of forested area. And these days, the temperature is high, it's very dry, and it's very conducive to forest fires. And Israel has been trying to burn the Lebanese forest for the duration of this war and before. They've used incendiary ammunition. They've tried to set forest fires deliberately. They find the forest is covered. The settler um, supermen like to see everything and not be seen. So they like to be able to see. They don't like the concealment that forests provide. Colonizers hate forests. They hate trees. I've talked about this before. They destroy olive trees. They destroy Lebanese cedars. They hate trees. They want to be able to see. They don't like to be seen. They take the high grounds, the Golan Heights. They occupy these areas and they try to look down on the people they're colonizing. So they took advantage of the weather to light a bunch of the Lebanese forest on fire, and then Hezbollah reciprocated. So now Kiryat Shimona has been affected very badly by fires. That they were under continuous rocket fire since the war started. Most of the residents had left, but now, as of now, I've seen reports that essentially the entire settlement has been emptied. So Safed, as you can see down here, another area surrounded by forest, another area that is burning right now. So there's this type, colonial warfare is always a war on the means of survival. It's always a war on nature, but it really is quite stark now. Both things that they're attacking the forest directly, the Israelis are, and now they're having their own forest, the forest they stole from the Palestinians, and those are burning now because Hezbollah is lighting them on fire as well. So now the entire north of Israel, Palestine, is on fire. If it's forested, it's on fire. And that is also a source of, I don't know, rage, colonial rage from the Israelis, which I think is also goading them into, I think, an extreme response and another invasion. I think there's been, as I've said, amped up rhetoric from Israeli politicians. Well, it's time for Lebanon to burn. It's time for Beirut to burn, all this kind of stuff. Now they're burning too. But I do see all of this when you put it all together, the statements by them, the speeches by Nasrallah, and the fact of these fires, the targeting of the Iron Dome, the way that the Hezbollah came so close to fire these shoulder-launched missiles on an Israeli base the other day. I think that an escalation of this war is coming, and I don't think it's going to be very long. So, um, that I think I'll leave it with that. I will say this, though. This is probably going to be my last sit rep for several weeks. I have to travel, not to Gaza. I'm not going to Gaza, but I do have to travel for work. I'm not going to have great internet. I'm not going to be able to post these. I might try to do some short form content, take a page out of Greg Stoker's book and post a minute or two a day if I get a chance from my cell phone. I think I'll be able to get some kind of data plan where I'm going, and I'll try to do that if I can. I mainly say this so you're not alarmed. Nothing happened to me. I just won't be reporting like I did for a couple of weeks. In at the very least in this format, I will try to do something. I'll still be on Twitter probably, although again, probably not as much as I usually am. So uh hang in there. I've told the tankies to make sure they get together in my absence. So hopefully you'll watch Sina's feed and Sina's channel, The East is a Podcast. Not here, it won't be here. And like and subscribe and comment, and you guys hang in there while I'm gone. I definitely recommend following the East is a Podcast in the meantime for reports on the tankies, and of course the Electronic Intifada. There'll be probably 2, maybe 3 live streams before I'm back. So I will see you then. Maybe I'll see you in some short form way on Instagram or um YouTube Shorts or something too. I'll TikTok, maybe. We'll see. I'll do what I can. Take care. Hang in there. We'll see you soon.